I
Oh,
think
I
that's.
think we just went live. I'm not used to doing. Yeah, it says live. I thought I had a stream thing that was going to pop up. 1 second here. Let me figure that out. I don't think anyone's going to tune in automatically. All right. All right, that's enough of that. Are we still good?
Sorry.
You could.
Yeah, we're good. I'm just I've got multiple. I got your YouTube page open. I'm about to share it. Also, I gotta have you talking in my ear both.
Sorry, man. I actually didn't think I was gonna pop onto the screen like that. I thought it would be just me for a second, but I'm still figuring this melon thing out. So, it's a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
How you doing, Jason?
I'm well, sir. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Getting off the ground here. I haven't done any solo work on this podcast in quite a while. So, feeling a little nervous. I normally have my co-host on. I'm sure you know how that feels. You got Mark with you. It's a security blanket, if you will.
The first solo talk, interview, whatever thing I ever did was with Adam Patrick, and I've never re-listened to that episode because I'm convinced it's absolute horseshit, and to the point where I almost feel like I should apologize to Adam. We talk, so it's fine. Obviously, it was probably just fine. It was just, it's in my head.
Do you listen to a lot of your stuff?
Well, when I'm editing, yeah. I go back and forth with it. Usually it's to listen to it to kind of find where I need to improve vocally.
Yeah.
I do a lot of the that I'm trying to eliminate, and pacing and all the rest of it. So yeah, I listen for that. But I mean, in terms of, and then doing clips, but in terms of like relisting for our ideas, generally not. I mean, Mark and I have been friends for a very long time, so
same. That's cool.
I kind of know where he's at. I know where I'm at.
How long have you guys been friends?
It's going to be 20 years soon. It's 20. If not 20 years this year, it'll be next year, something like that.
That's cool, man. We have like some things in common with our podcast. We both
Absolutely.
two co-hosts, both podcasts. The friends have been friends for a long time. My friend Chris is my co-host, and we've been friends for over 30 years. You know, we met each other when we were like little kids. We lived, you know, right down the street from each other. So that's cool. I don't really, you know, we've been doing it for about 2 years. You said that you guys have been doing it for a similar amount of time. You know, sometimes I still feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, but you know, some episodes are good. You know, some episodes we get done and I'm like, that was a good one. So
it's an interesting progress. I mean, I remember when we first started, even when our audio really sucked, and yeah, we didn't have a concept. The concept of our show is two old friends talking about things and stuff. That's been the concept throughout, and we've kind of through that process of doing it every week. And we kept it up even when I moved to Australia, because I'm originally from Montreal. That's where I knew Mark from, and when I moved out to Australia, obviously there was, you know, I think we missed a week. I think in total in the last 2 years, going on 2 years, we've missed maybe a week or two, like hardly any shows, and we just it's the ritual of doing it. You get more comfortable. You start to understand better what the show kind of is really about, because you always have to answer the question of why. And I have various answers for that depending on the day, but you know, it's starting to take shape, and I think what you guys are doing, since our shows are very similar in terms of format, and a lot of people who are friends of our channel and we've had on for the Friend or Fed or whatever have you, a lot of their channels are somewhat similar, in that sense of just talking, right? Like it's not a Tim Pool thing. It's you know, Rogan is kind of the semi model, but I think his effects are through the podcasting world are, you know, you can't get away from it, right? He's the lead dog, right? So
absolutely.
So I think there's always elements of that, but you know, Mark and I were just talking about this yesterday.
On your last stream?
Yeah, but we off stream we were talking about it, and you know, with YouTube, we've had these really weird spikes of numbers, right? Where you know, we just hit 200 subscribers on YouTube. Yay!
Congratulations.
Well, you know,
I think we just hit 30, so you guys are doing all right.
You know, it's I don't know how these things work really, but
yeah, me neither.
So we'll get these weird spikes of episodes where we'll hit like 1,000 or close to 1,000. We had the Dave Smith Friend or Fed, which got silly. You know, things like that have happened, and then we calm down and get numbers which are like 120 or 30 or 40. You know, YouTube is obviously suppressing certain things, so we don't do a YouTube friendly show technically. So, you know, I'm basically just amazed we're still around on YouTube, to be honest with you. We've had a few community strikes. I've challenged them; they've been reversed. I don't know. We're still here, so
yeah,
we'll keep talking.
We just got on YouTube. We've got a bunch of content, you know, on Spotify and Apple and stuff like that. But we just moved over to YouTube. You know, I wasn't really keen on the idea of my fat face being on YouTube, but here it is. You know, so we're still building up the YouTube. Most of our videos are, you know, we get like 80 views or something like that. Nothing crazy. The last two that we've put up have broken 100. So that, you know, that's progress. We got a little bump, you know, the channel, The Crucible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our last episode that Chris and I did together, we talked about a debate that they did there. And
I watched that one recently. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
well, Andrew from The Crucible watched it too. And he talked about, he like, you know, played it on the Super Show that they did on Monday, and just kind of tore my co-host apart for that episode. Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. You know, in kind of good fun. You know, we'll see how it goes over. My co-host still hasn't seen it yet. Andrew's going to send it to me because I guess anything that's not a debate gets taken down immediately. So, but you know, we're plugging away.
I'm not a fan of, and this isn't a dig on the Crucible itself. I'm just never been a fan of that style.
That's how my co-host feels.
Yeah, I mean, even back in my atheist days, when I was consuming like just bucket loads of new atheist stuff, like Christopher Hitchens and that kind of thing.
I remember that phase.
Yeah, when you watch like masters at work, that's interesting. But generally speaking, it's always bad faith arguments anyways, because the questions usually are shit. Like the framing is always awkward, and you're into this winning right and wrong mentality. It's not about truth anymore. It's about being right or wrong, or proving the other person right or wrong. I mean, this is what happened with Jim Bob and Owen.
Oh yeah, well, that was a particularly embarrassing debate.
There's no other way I don't think it could go in some ways, because especially with theology and something like, as one thing I've learned through my study of orthodoxy is that there's a lot of very simple answers that on the surface are very simple, but once you get into them, it's very deep and complex, and it's almost easier to simply just say because God and move on. How does God substantiate himself in three forms? Because it's God, and just move on, man. because he's trying to communicate to us dumbass fallen human beings, and he needs different, and he's choosing different ways of doing that. Just move on, like accept it or don't. And I don't, it's a weird thing, and I don't want to cash it on Jim Bob, but it's one of those things when you start down the path, I think you get this heady rush, like all of a sudden things start making sense, and it's very easy to get into vainglory or a prideful situation where you feel like you need to defend the faith, or that you have these answers, and now you're this big brain, follower of Christ and all this kind of stuff.
It's not very humble.
It's not very humble, and it's also it's ultimately it ultimately does more damage than good. Buck Johnson, when he was on our show recently, made a quote, and I can't remember who he's quoting, but he said, it's easier to talk a man out of heaven than it is into church, right? Like basically you can talk someone out of faith by presenting things in a way that seems combative or too foreign for their ears and some of that. So
sure.
if Jim Bob and Owen really were friends, or if I was friends with Owen, and if my intent at any kind and on any level was to bring him into the Orthodox Church, debating the Trinity would be the worst way possible.
Sure.
It's
I think
like downstream things.
Yeah, I think that this is something that I talked about with my co-host on that episode, is that I think a lot of the times the debate is for people who might be listening, who need to make or trying to make their mind up on a topic. I'm curious whether Jim Bob thought he was actually going to change Owen's mind. And I am pretty certain that Owen didn't think he was going to change Jim Bob's mind. That debate, you have watched that. I know I asked you on one of your live streams and you said you hadn't yet. It was like right when it happened.
I watched about half. I watched about to the point where it stopped being an argument and started being a battle of insults. And I just stopped that. And I watched Matt Erickson and Cooper do the rebuttal.
I watched that too.
And then I watched what else have I watched? There's been a whole bunch of other stuff. The preceding stuff I've watched segments of. I think when Matt had Jim Bob on his show, I watched the majority of that. I don't get involved in the arguments. Like there's even the Ortho versus Roman Catholic online stuff. I've had a few Roman Catholic guys try to bait me into things, and I just tell them straight up, like, I have no argument with you, man. Nothing you're going to say is going to change my faith because of how I came to it. It's not. It's not a philosophical position for me. It's not. I think I'm. And I know you want to talk about my transition to Orthodoxy, so I think this is a good bridge for it.
Sure.
Like my path into this is a little bit different than a lot of the other online guys who are doing Orthodoxy or talking Orthodoxy, and because of that, it's like I have a natural immunity to a lot of this stuff because it's like this is not my battle. Like I don't really care what you guys are saying. It doesn't change. It's not going to change anything in my headset. So there's nothing you're going to say that made me go, oh well, maybe I should question it. I've already gone through a massive shift of consciousness. Like I only got one in me, and this is it.
Yeah. So you said this is something I was not aware of. We were talking a little bit before the stream. My dog needs some attention right now. You were saying that you were, kind of born into Orthodoxy, which is, one of the things I wanted to talk about is a lot of the people I hear talk about Orthodoxy have certain interesting things in common. That is not one of them, though. I don't think I've heard anybody who,
Okay, well, I wouldn't consider myself a cradle Orthodox. Orthodox is basically someone whose parents are Orthodox or family was Orthodox, who was born into it, who was baptized as a child, et cetera, and kind of baked into it from birth. I wouldn't consider myself cradle. My situation was that my birth father is French Canadian. My mother's born in Canada, but her family is Ukrainian Polish. My mother and birth father divorced when I was very young. I was raised by my mother and her family. My grandfather, her father, essentially raised me as a surrogate father. He was Russian Orthodox. One of my aunts was heavily involved in the church. My grandfather wasn't. His relationship to Slavics in general and the Slavic culture was a bit problematic. He just didn't like Slavs, and I remember one of his pieces of advice to me. It was like, if ever someone comes up to you and goes, my Ukrainian or my Russian brother, look for the knife in your back. Like, just be very, very careful.
Gotcha.
So we weren't really raised with the culture that heavily. There was always aspects of it. You can't get away from it, but we were never really raised with it. He had divorced his family long before that. So anyway, so long story short, he dies when I'm 12. So I was raised with religion around me. We didn't really go to church. I did read the Bible. I certainly did believe in God. My grandfather died of cancer when I was 12. It was a long bout for about a year and a bit. At which point I had been praying a lot for God to save him. When he died, I couldn't square the idea of an all-loving, all benevolent God with the way he had died. So that's where my resentment started, and I turned from God at that point, out of anger and resentment. That was when I was about 12 years old. So when I say I was an atheist for 32 years, that was kind of my starting point, even though I didn't even know what an atheist was at that time. Flash forward into my 40s. December 2019, I was working as a bar manager. I was hanging up Christmas decorations. I fell backwards and put my hand through about 5 bottles in the back bar, almost severing my thumb. Yeah, I know you can't really see it, but it's too much light. Anyways, so I almost severed that thumb off. It's basically the bone saved it from being cut right off.
Wow.
So I had an operation on that. My wife was pregnant. We just figured my wife was pregnant. We had to move because the house we were living in, that we'd been living in for a long time, got sold out from beneath us. And then COVID hit. in February, or what it was, of 2020. So all those things start happening. We kind of deal with everything. We get an apartment down the street. I get my hands sewed together. We go through rehab of a sort and get that kind of figured out. My wife gives birth to this beautiful baby girl. that brings us to October of 2020, when I start having a succession of breakdowns. I'm not an overly emotional human being, more or less. I get angry. Like all my emotions, I'm either more or less happy. I'm generally annoyed, but anything that gets
we have
intense
a common disposition, apparently.
Yeah, I just get angry. That's my only negative.
Yeah.
I don't cry really very often, if at all. So, and I just like I was holding my baby daughter, and like the Rainbow Connection would come on, and I was just bawling, like ugly crying, you know. Because and we had just gone into second lockdowns in Quebec, and I don't know if you knew about the COVID situation in Quebec at the time, but it was pretty harsh. We got a curfew, an 8 o'clock curfews it put in, and that was really demoralizing. Like it was a strange thing that at 7:30, around 7:30, you started getting depressed, and you didn't really know why, you know. And then you just realized, like, oh yeah, because we can't leave the house. Not that I wanted to. It was the middle of freaking winter. You know, it was coming into winter and baby girl and all the rest of it. But the fact that you couldn't was a weird psychological effect. So all these things are happening. I'm becoming very aware of how vulnerable our situation is. You know, I was a restaurant manager and worked in the restaurants for 25 years. Up to that point, my career, because of the hand, was basically that was over, or definitely would make that a lot more difficult. And I wanted to get out anyways. So facing all these things, and remember by this point, I'm still an atheist. I'm an atheist, anti-theist. I'd been watching a lot of Jordan Peterson, his Bible series, and watching a lot of Pageau's. I like symbolism. So I'd been kind of softening my position. I was for a long time, very, very anti-religion and religious people. I had softened my position on that, but was still very much an atheist. I started having these breakdowns in October, and at one point, I just basically called out. I don't even know if I was really calling out to God so much, but I was just calling out, like, what do I do? Like, what's going on? What do I do? And at that point, I had a very distinct. I had a voice to talk to me. There was definitely a voice telling me to bear witness, and I said, "Okay, I can do that," not knowing what I had just gotten myself into, and then I had a process, and it was about a week or two after that I was hit with this intense amount of shame. And this is how I know these things are real. Like, this is because and again, I'm thinking, okay, I've cracked up. Like, there's a very good percent chance that I have just now gone insane, which is going to be really awkward because I have this new baby girl and all this stuff. But then things start happening that if I'm nuts, then I'm nuts with all the right people, and that hitting of shame really kind of made it real, because that's not something that I was prepared for, or I don't. The connectivity of that is kind of weird. Like when you're hit with it, and I'm not talking just like, oh, you feel kind of bad about yourself, oh, whatever. No, I was like hit with this like almost divine sense of shame. So then I tried working that out, and I kind of it was around soon after that. I talked to my wife about. My wife's Australian. She comes from a big family out here. It was December of 2020. Yeah, 2020, where I talked to her. I was like, let's think about moving to Australia. We make that decision, and then I'm still trying to deal with what the hell just happened. And because of my family influence, I was like, well, if Christianity is needed in my life, if religion is needed in my life, there's a family connection to Orthodoxy. My grandfather is very much my model. Let's check out Orthodoxy. Then I encounter the Jesus prayer, I think through Cyprian, and start saying that, and things start happening. And we moved to Australia, and here we are. So I haven't started my catechumenism yet. so I'm not an expert on anything. I try to not talk too much depth in Orthodoxy, other than kind of general stuff that I understand, and I think that is safe to say.
Sure.
I'll be trying to do all that stuff this year, but yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't want to have you on to like dig into the theology or anything like that. I do think that the theology is extremely interesting, and I'm happy to get more and more into it. But I really don't even know what to ask you. You know, like if you were an expert on theology, I wouldn't even really know where to start on what I am trying to figure out about this. You know, I'm completely new in it. You said that you came to the Jesus prayer through Cyprian. I actually came to the Jesus prayer through you. So thank you for that.
Oh,
yeah, absolutely.
God bless.
Yep. So I had my path to Orthodoxy has been, you know, and I've only been to one Orthodox liturgy. So, you know, it's not like I'm a catechumen or anything, but I am aiming to do that as soon as possible. But I was born into a religious family, Protestant, you know, church every Sunday. I went to Christian schools, you know, church multiple times a week, a lot of the time. And, you know, my coming out of Christianity was more a product of, you know, I was watching, I was young, you know, I was going on the internet watching people, you know, smart people that I thought were smart, talking about things, science, blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of fell into that trap. You know, I fell into everything is just material. You know, the Sam Harris's, Joe Rogan was a huge influence on me. I was on the Joe Rogan train before his podcast. I used to read his blog way back in the day, which is funny because I'm not that much of a Rogan guy anymore. But yeah, so you know, then I had some things happen, you know, some people that died when they were young that, you know, that just really messed me up and made me kind of start questioning things too. So that, you know, I was an atheist, a nihilist, a materialist, just miserable for years, not knowing why I was miserable, you know, just wallowing in misery for years. Depressed as can be. I don't even think I realized that I was depressed. I just think that I thought that life was garbage, you know, and that everyone felt the way that I did. So I was living down in Columbus. I live in Cleveland, Ohio now. I was living down in Columbus, and I got an opportunity to move up here and take a job, and I did. And I was alone a lot. I had a roommate down in Columbus and just constant distraction. You know what I mean? Constant never thinking about what my problems are. So I moved up here. I was alone a lot more. I have family up here. All of my direct family lives up here. But I was still alone a lot, and I worked by myself a lot. So I just had lots of time to think. And instead of distracting myself all the time, I still did a lot of distracting myself, but I just started to think about things, and that opened me up somewhat. But another thing that I've noticed that a lot of people who come to Orthodoxy have in common is psychedelic experiences. And I I had been interested in psychedelics for a long time because of Rogan, and never really got to try them. But then a few years ago, I started doing some psychedelics, and I don't know if you have any experience with that, but it is just something that it's an experience. You know, it's just something completely foreign to, you know, I went away. I was somewhere else. I was not here in this world. And just the feelings that you have when you're in there, you know, it feels like things are communicating with you, and it's telling you that everything is connected. And you can tell in some way that that is true, you know? So the psychedelics did a lot for breaking down the barrier that I had built between myself and God. And that definitely kind of opened me up. Jordan Peterson was another huge one for me too. Jordan Peterson, I heard Matt say this when he was on with David Patrick Harry the other day, that Jordan Peterson allowed him to be interested in the Bible again. And I completely agree with that, because Jordan Peterson presents it to you in this way where it's like, you don't have to believe that it's real. You can believe that it's true still. That was fascinating to me. So that really opened me up to being open to the Bible again. And I did this thing for a long time where, I was libertarian, I was an ANCAP, and I was just like dancing this line of, I'm a libertarian. You should be able to do what you want as long as you're not hurting people. The thing that people say where libertarianism borrows everything from Christianity except Christ, and they replace Christ with the individual. And I was doing that for a long time. I was very, very conservative. I tend to say that generally I'm the most right-wing person in the room. I'm not like bragging about that or anything, but I just think it's the truth. Unless I'm like with my online friends, I'm probably the most conservative person in the room, the most traditionalist thinking type person in the room. But I was not living up to that. You know what I mean? I was espousing those ideas because I did believe that they were right, but I was not living them. And I didn't have the strength to live them because it wasn't real. It wasn't grounded in anything. I wasn't doing it for any real reason. And I think a lot of the libertarian, the like do what thou wilt attitude of libertarianism kind of like fostered my, the degenerate things that I was nothing that degenerate. I just, it's like like pretty much everyone in the West, every male anyways. I got
the standard Western pack. Yeah. You're watching porn.
Yeah. All the time. Yep.
And playing video games and
yep.
Hating life and
just wasting my time. Yep. Yeah, exactly. So I was doing all that. And so the last year of my life, I put a tweet out saying this the other day. The last year of my life has not been good. It's been a real rough year. I've been in basically this slow motion breakup. And the breakup, now that I'm looking at it through the lens that I'm looking at it through, I know was because I was being a hypocrite. I had this great girl. We were engaged, and I just fucked up, like, I don't want to get too much in detail. I don't want to embarrass her or anything, but, yeah, I just blew it. And I've been just like depressed and miserable. And it just hit me one day. It's like, you need to start actually being the things that you say are good. You need to start being that. So I've definitely, I'm ready. Like I said, I want to get into an Orthodox church as soon as possible and start making that progress, because it's what I know I need to do. I consider myself a Christian at this point. I've had that conversation with God, asking, repenting, asking for forgiveness. But I know that I need to be in a community. I'm ready for that for sure.
Well, God bless, man. Yeah, it's Orthodoxy is about healing. It's really what the chief primacy of the church really is. Christ famously said, I come to heal the sick, not the well. Yeah, there's a lot of it. I think people who are ready for sacrifice. Okay, let's put it this way. I think religion, the biggest thing religion can do, and especially religion like Orthodoxy or Christianity, it can give you context. It's why it's a worldview where all the other ideologies aren't. Libertarianism can't tell you what to do when your parents die, or when you go through a breakup, or when you become a father, or all those other things.
Those are great points.
It can't address that, and I know a lot of people, it's not birthday, just a nap, and
yeah, but you need something.
You need something. You need something. You need something that grounds you and gives you a direction, and that you can extrapolate from and go, okay, even with prayer, right? Like the Jesus prayer, prayer is redemption. It's redemption in one line. If people don't know what it is, it's Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And if you can break down all those things, but the big one is mercy, because mercy can also mean to be gifted, to be given mercies, which were gifts, or the more traditional idea of being not the worst thing happening to you, right? Whatever the worst thing could be, bring it back a little bit. But it's also the admission of sin, right? I'm a sinner, all right? You're admitting you're a sinner. You're admitting that you're going to sin today. You're admitting your status as a fallen human being, and you're asking for mercy. And that's redemption. It's redemption in a line that you can just say over and over and over. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. It brings you peace. It's an amazing little tool. And I think the transformative nature of all this stuff is the thing that you can't. It's why the debates don't work, because I can't tell you. I can tell you what it is, but you have to feel it. You have to experience it. You have to come to it on your own terms. Jesus will meet you where you're at, and if you're open to it, you will be transformed. I went from, like I said, 32 years atheist, anti-theist to Orthodox Christian in a radically short span of time, to the point where my wife just keeps thinking this is a phase. And she met me as an atheist. And my wife is I wouldn't call her an atheist. She's probably more the agnostic sort of live and let live. These things are all stories, that kind of thing. But yeah, she's still very perplexed with. She saw the Death to the World shirt the other day, and
it's a cool shirt, man.
It's a great shirt, right? But she just and I explained it to her, and she's looking at me like, and God bless her. Like that's. If I was in her position, I would be doing the exact same thing. It's still weird to me. I still catch myself going, "What is okay?" Get up and saying your prayers every day. Yeah, it's needed. I think. I think that's why the orthodoxy thing. There's a few reasons why. One, I think people are looking for that purity. They're looking for truth. I've done this on the show quite a bit. Western, we've the Enlightenment, essentially what it is collapse truth and truth. If you look at the parallels, it's like, let's say we go from right to wrong and truth to let's say lies or distruth, right? Good to evil. We can even say truth, good, evil, which is the cross, right? What the Enlightenment essentially has done is collapse those two terms down. So now we think being right is the same thing as being truthful, and that's not true, and that's not accurate, because you can be truthful and wrong, but you can still be standing in truth. You and all the other quadrants still apply. To be truthful is to be kicking it up towards God. It's ascending. It is the transformer. It is what allows us to transcend and to be transformed. You can't do that in any other quadrant. You have to be in that quadrant of truth, and you can be right and you can be wrong. Like you can get things wrong, and we often do, because our capacity of knowledge is only this big, and things change. But the Western mind is so obsessed with being right and having the facts and having the figures and all that stuff that they miss the fact that it's all narrative. Like we saw this for the last 2-3 years. And we're seeing this with the Ukrainian war, and we're seeing with all these other things. And I think now that the big red pill is that people are becoming more and more aware that this is just a story. And it's not just like the way they talk about Christianity being a story. Now they have to look at reality as a story. And that's screwing people up, because when you realize that all your facts and figures don't matter in the face of a good narrative, and that the only way to defeat the narrative is to come at it with a different narrative, and that is the challenge for both the faithful and anyone who is against the regime and libertarians and all that kind of stuff. It's not just make songs, right? Like, or whatever. It's got to form this narrative that becomes more powerful. I'll give you an example. The Paul Pelosi story, right? When Paul Pelosi's the Pelosi's house got broken in. There's confusion
Supposedly.
about what happened. Well, I mean, whatever, right?
Yeah.
We'll go with the official version that some crazy guy broke into the house, essentially was kidnapping Paul Pelosi. Paul somehow got a call out to people. The cops came, went to arrest the guy, or went to told the guy to drop a hammer. The guy beat Paul up with a hammer. Okay, we can just take it as that's the narrative, the official narrative. The narrative that came out after that is that Paul Pelosi's a homosexual. He was doing drug deals with this guy, whatever. That narrative was way more powerful to the point where they had to drop the story. They just like, they wanted to have that story. They wanted to position him, the crazy guy, as a pro-Trump, right before the primaries. They had an 86 act story immediately.
That's a great point.
Became much more compelling. It could be totally false. It could be completely and totally not dealing with real reality at all. But it's a really good story. And that one beat the other one, and they had to drop it. And now they have it. Whatever. Like I don't care what happens to Paul Pelosi, but it just was amusing to watch. And like, see, that's how one narrative can defeat the other, because everyone wanted that. Everyone wanted Paul to be gay and have some weird hammer fetish thing. They wanted that to be true, man. They really wanted that to be true.
Yeah, it is definitely the better story. That's definitely
absolutely
that's a great example. That really makes it clear the power of the narrative. So many things that you see are like that, but that one, I don't know. Having it laid out to me like that it just does make it very clear. I do want to believe the gay hammer story, though. That it's more entertaining. No, it's just way more entertaining. No,
way more sexy. Yeah. So with Christianity, and I think with Orthodoxy going forward, one of the things that always amazes me now, especially now that I'm reading the Bible, I read the Bible a lot, even as an atheist, but I always did it in a negative sense, and now rereading it in a positive sense, an accepting sense, it's a totally different experience. And what amazes me is that Christianity itself, and I said this on the last stream, was that I think the Jews have an Ashkenazi problem as much as the Christians Christians have an evangelical problem, because when you say Christian to a lot of people, especially in the West, they're thinking televangelists, they're thinking charismatics, they're thinking healing on hands, they're thinking all the really weird, silly stuff. And you almost have to disavow all of that stuff to even get to the weird shit I believe in. So, which is weird enough as it is. So, we're saddled with those things, and in order to tell a better story, we have to first deal with the bad elements, or the elements that make us look ridiculous. And then even with the Roman Catholics, I mean, the Roman Catholics can't keep burying this stuff. They've got a heretical pope. They've got a whole bunch of other problems that they need to deal with before they do anything else. But I believe it. I think ultimately, the Jesus story, this quote unquote story, transformed every single civilization that accepted it. Every single civilization before Christ practiced on some level human sacrifice, whether it was direct through cannibalism, killing and cannibalism, or expulsion through the scapegoat. This is all from René Girard. And then you get the Christ message, and within a generation, human sacrifice stops. I mean, completely stops. Not just practiced by some fringe elements and stuff like that. That's gone, right? If it's just a story, that's a hell of a story for people to abandon thousands of years of ritual and tradition on a dime, because you presented with these people who are willing to die and be persecuted for Christ. it changes things. So I think we're into a new narrative structure, and I think what is upon us, if we are to bear witness, if we are to testify, uh, uh, isn't trying to convert people. It's simply just telling the story, right? Living the story, showing the story, being the story,
Yeah.
as much as possible, being that narrative, uh, being the praxis of that narrative, and it being undeniable. So, and we don't have to judge it on success. We don't have to judge it on YouTube numbers. We don't have to judge it on any of that stuff. We judge it by the quality of a man's heart. And I think that stuff is instantly recognizable. There are people I've been drawn to in the space: Tommy Salmons, Buck Johnson, Matt Erickson, all those guys, and automatic kinship. Like I felt like I know these guys, and we've never met, and we probably maybe never will. But there's a kinship there that I think that commonality of orthodoxy gives you, because you're struggling together, and you recognize the struggle, and you understand what sacrifice and suffering is. And we can share those stories, but we also understand that we're all going through it, and you extend that out to everybody, and suddenly it gets really hard to judge anybody. I'll still take the shit out of Clint Russell just because I think it's funny, but at the same time, I from my heart, I wish him well and may God bless him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Clint is not my favorite person in the world. Well, I shouldn't say it that way. He's not my favorite Twitter personality on the world. But yeah, I have no ill will for the guy. That's completely silly. So I'm with you on that. But as far as the Orthodox guys online being, that immediate kinship, I don't. A lot of the guys I've not even talked to, I've had a little bit of communication with Matt Erickson, and most of it has been with Buck. And I can't say enough nice stuff about Buck Johnson. That he's just the nicest guy. I know he's a busy guy. He's got a real, his real world job. He has a big podcast. But every time I come to Buck with a question, he takes the time to, help me with that. And, I've come to Buck with some weird shit. So, I really appreciate that guy.
Yeah, he's very, very kind. That's what I'm saying. You should join the King Pill Discord. I'm not shilling. I get nothing for this. I still paying Matt $25 a month to be part of the group. And anyone who's listening to this who's interested in these kind of things, if your life is just missing some autistic talk about theology and orthodoxy and shit posting about memes and all the rest of it, that's what the group is. So check it out. It's I'm not your secretary. Google that shit. Just go.
You can find it.
Yeah, through
Subscribestar, King Pilled.
Yeah. Give Matt some money and be part of the group. It's good. It honestly I said this to Matt when he was on our show, is that it was a saving grace for me, especially when I moved to Australia, because I was still I had processed quite a bit by the time we started the podcast and with Mark and I left Canada, but I was still in that kind of what is this, right? I was still very unsure, and joining that group and talking to a lot of guys who were in similar positions or maybe a little bit further along really helped me a lot. It was definitely a lifeline for me through all of 2022, really. So thank you for Matt Erickson for that. And if anyone else is in that boat, we should check them out.
I'll be there shortly on that Discord for sure. So one of the things that I see coming down the pipe being a problem for me is, did you happen to catch that Matt Erickson on Church of the Eternal Logos that was, it was 2 days ago or something? At one point, David Patrick Carey was talking about how he had started going to that church, and they had he had to sit in a separate room because of COVID, and he wanted to, I can't remember if he said he wanted to leave, but he wasn't happy with it. But the priest told him to, just see what happens, And I can definitely see that being a problem with me in the future, me wanting to be in control, me wanting to take things in the direction that I want things to go. You know what I mean?
Always remember, it's not about you. It's really not about you. It's,
yep.
you're forming a personal relationship to Christ and to God. So that part is you. You are making these choices. You are giving context to your suffering. You are giving context to all these things. You are walking the moral path. That is you, and Christ is pulling you. So there's the personal relationship. Everything else, though, it's not about you. If you go to liturgy, it's to join your voice with the choir for God. It's not even about the church. It's not even about, like, it is about the church, obviously, but it's not about your relationship to it. There's so in the hierarchy of all things, and this is something that we talked about on Matt's Discord, is that you have to, it's not just being aware of the hierarchy. It's also being aware of your position in the hierarchy and obeying the hierarchy in your position to its fullest degree. So if you're, a catechumen or pre-catechumen, or you're, first year Orthodox or whatever you are on that level, you're at the very bottom. And it's not up to you to ask questions. It's not up to you to even have opinions about the way this is being handled. If you don't like it, leave. If it's really, if you're not finding value at all in liturgy, go to a different church, maybe. I don't know, right? I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just simply saying, like, you do have options, but suffering is part of it. It just is. So you're going to encounter lots of different things along the way. That once you become aware of it, you can give it that context of just simply saying, okay, well, this is your suffering, and in most cases, like, what are you being really asked to do? Asked to be sitting in a different room for the liturgy. You're not being kicked out of church. You're not being persecuted. You're not being fed to lions. You're not being hunted down. You're not like, like, if you look at the history of the church, like, dude, this is nothing. This is easy street, right? But it is confronting your own ego. There's a term called vainglory that I think I first heard Father Turbo talk about it, and it hit me, right? More so than the other passions, which are a bit more obvious. But vainglory is this, like, very pernicious little thing that works in the background. It's almost like depression, right? I think Father Turbo made this analogy, said this, and this is what made me go, when you're suffering from depression, say, that's actually vainglorious, because what you're saying is, how dare this happen to me? These horrible things have happened to me, and it's horrible, and it's, these things shouldn't be happening. And when you take a step out of that, it's like, well, first of all, it's not about you, sunshine. Like, it's just happening. And two, it's like, well, grow. here's your opportunity. If you want to make it about you, great, make it about you and grow, or wither up and die. Like, you're always given this choice, and God is giving you this amazing ability right now to grow and to develop, to abandon all your other things that are making this horrible for you, and bear the cross. It's one of my things about Elon's Neuralink and a lot of these technologies that are seeming to people are pressing them as a way to remove suffering from the world. And it's like, because suffering is our way of growth. I understand, and that's a very hard thing to say to someone who, whose mom is dying of cancer, or who's blind, or has, I get it. That's a harsh thing to say. At the same time, life is harsh, and
it's the truth. Yeah.
And the more we remove those things, the less likely people are going to have agency in their life. They're just going to become, slaves of the state, slaves of the medicine, slave of pleasure, slave of the passions, because they think, oh, I can just take this pill and be fine. Well, there's deleterious effects downstream that we're seeing, that, even with birth control and the rest of it. Like, it liberated a lot of women, and there's a lot of, we can argue the good things about it, But 30, 40 years down the road, we got some problems.
Things are getting hairy for sure. Yeah, that's great. It's not about you, the suffering that you need suffering. I think a lot of people, if you told them, if they were looking at someone else who was suffering and you told them, yeah, it sucks for them, but they need it to grow, they would be like, yeah, that makes sense. But when it's happening to you, that you start doing things like doubting God, things like that. And sometimes I have this habit of, I feel strong right now, so I'm going to make this comment of like, I don't think I will ever doubt God's existence again. And I honestly, right now, I don't see how I ever could. But I don't know. They say the thing about God. People pray for patience, and then they get just like the world thrown at them. I kind of feel like I'm tempting fate when I say I don't think things will ever get so bad that I will question God again.
Yeah. Be careful. Be careful.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. I have to be aware of myself.
Here's I'm just speaking personally. Here's what helps me is that God commanded me to bear witness. And I'm very careful with telling that story. I think this is the last time I'm going to tell that story. I've been kind of shying away from repeating that story. I've done it a few times in various forms because the more times you repeat it, the more times you want to add to it, the more or less accurate it becomes. And I'm afraid of details creeping in that weren't present at the time. Like I sometimes, and I've caught myself doing this. Where I said, "Oh, you told me to bear witness and testify." I was like, "That testify wasn't in there. It was bear witness, motherfucker." That's what he said. That's what he told you. So like, be very exact. Bear witness in this sense has a spectrum, and one of the spectrums is what happened to. One spectrum is just to bear witness of God and to bear witness of His creation and to walk the moral path and to bring God into your life. That's one level of it. The other level of it is what happened to the Russian Orthodox priests when they were when the Bolsheviks took over, and they were asked to sign the paper, which for the false church, with a gun to their head, and they said, "Glory to God in all things," and were shot in the head. That's bearing witness as well. So, in that spectrum, and because I wasn't told what that meant, I was just all God told me was bear witness, and I said I can do that, and then flash forward a few years, I'm like, I might have stepped into something here. And I don't regret anything. Glory to God for that. But one of the things that I know beyond knowing, beyond fact, beyond everything else, one thing I know for absolute sure is when I die, I will go to heaven. I will be I will join with the Father, with my Father and with the Father. I know that for sure. And I'll prepare a space for my family. So I don't fear it. It's not a consideration. Now, do I want it? No. Am I inviting that? No. But I'm prepared for it. I'm prepared for it, and because of because I know beyond knowing that is true, then there's nothing anyone can do to me. The only thing they can do to me is kill me. They can martyr me, and that's that. But I don't think that's actually, my intuition says that's not going to happen necessarily, but we'll see what happens. But when you're prepared for it, all the rest of it is just like the state, the external stuff is like, what are you going to do? Like, I know where I'm going. And I'm not even that far down the path, but I know in my heart that I've at least repented to the point where I don't think I'm going to be turned away. I will be, God's love might burn me. I might spend some time burning in God's love, which is the Orthodox idea of hell. But I know that eventually I will be accepted. I know where I'm going, and it's up to me now. And that doesn't mean I stop and go, well, I'm good, job done. I want to continue furthering that, but I think once you accept that, everything else doesn't. It fades. Death of the World. I can read it from I bought their latest magazine, but Death of the World. The world in this sense means the passions, and passions are the inversions of God's gift. So when you talk about the passions together, you can talk about the world. To be in this world, not of it. So to deaf to the world is be for the saints or those who have approached theosis, who are basically living while dead, because they are dead to the world. They're dead to the passions. Those things have no room in their heart. They don't have an effect on them. So they are living while dead, essentially. And then of course everyone go to Death of the World if you're interested in this. Buy their swag.
That's a good looking shirt, man. That's probably in my future. I remember I heard about them naturally, like I hear about tons of things from Buck's podcast. Yeah,
don't worry about it, man. My daughter interrupts all the time.
It's my brother.
That's okay.
Yeah. So the you said the word theosis there. My podcast host did make a request for a theology question. If you're up for it, what is theosis?
Theosis is union with God.
It's that simple as that.
It's becoming one with God. So
yeah.
So the idea with theosis, especially, is to do it here. So a lot of saints, a lot of church fathers who later become saints, as they're approaching theosis, they've been said to glow. The body doesn't. Oftentimes, when they've reached theosis, their body doesn't decompose after death. There's various forms of it, but essentially, it is becoming one with God, which is so. Where the inversion has become is that I think in modern Western ideas, this is happening throughout the world, it's global now, is to remove God from the hierarchy and put man there, and so we can become gods, which in a sense is kind of what God laid out for us, but it's really to become one with God, right? It's not to try to subvert God or become higher than God, which is a very Luciferian kind of aspect to it.
Yeah,
it's to become one with Him, to be enveloped by God's love. Like the Lord of Spears is a really great resource for all this stuff, because they really break it down. Especially for the language, they break down what these things mean, not just in literal translations, but how they were being probably used at the time of the writing, or at the time it was being used or created. But what was I getting at? Theosis, Heart of Spirits. Damn, I just missed it. Just lost it.
Happens to the best of us, man.
Theosis. I lost it now. Sorry, but Lord of Spirits is good. Is a good resource. Yeah, but
it's a great podcast.
One with
God. So to do that, to become one with God, this is my limited understanding of Orthodoxy, and basically all of it comes through David Patrick Carey and Jay Dyer. Is to do that, it's through participating in the uncreated energies of God.
Oh, okay. No.
No.
So, okay. Well, no. Yeah, I don't know if I'm qualified to get too deep into that stuff. So essentially, is this: Christ is the figure, right? So God, and this gets into the Trinity. God's trying to communicate to us, so He brings Himself down to our level. It's an act of humility, which is distinct from any other religion or myth or any other. In polytheism, oftentimes Zeus would take a different form and come around the mortals, but it was usually just a rape or fuck some women, right? Like that's usually they had their own. They had very kind of other reasons for it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, earthly pleasures those gods were indulging in a lot of the time.
Right. But God, we see this throughout the Old Testament. God can't speak to us directly because God can't be someplace where there's sin, And it's not that he can't be there, is that if he's there, God destroys sin. So if you have sin in you, he will destroy you by just being in his presence. So the idea is you can't be in God's presence. Adam before the fall was sinless, and he walked with God. He was able to communicate with the Godhead, with the pure essence of God. Then the fall happens, and we lose that connection. So we see throughout all the Old Testament, God will speak to us through intermediaries, oftentimes through the angel of Christ, which is the pre-incarnated the pre-incarnate Christ in the Old Testament, or through angels, or through he sends missives through prophets like Moses and all the rest of it. And even with those prophets, he's never talking to. He's not like God shows up and is talking to them. There's other instances where God will turn his back, so you can only speak to the back of God. You can't see his face again because it would just kill you. That's substantiated throughout all the Old Testament, and what God really does is what's necessary, because we've again fallen away from everything, and God believes that we're ready for the New Testament. Is he sends us his son, which means he comes down, or this is where the language gets really tricky, but he essentially takes a mortal form in order to instruct us. So Jesus Christ is God, and this gets into the energies, essences distinction. I think that's usually the best way to understand it. This is also the whole idea of personhood and nature. but yeah, the best way of the best way I can describe it from my understanding is that we can't understand the true essence of God. It's beyond us. Like, just imagine that's just, it's like infinity, right? It's just something you can say, but you don't really understand it. So if God's that, he's trying to communicate to us and have a relationship to us in different forms. So there's God the Father, which we understand as the Father. We understand the archetypic Father. We get a handle on that. It's not all that God is, but it suffices for us, right? For our understanding of God. God the Son, and we can understand the Son, and we can understand Jesus, and we can follow Jesus' path and model Jesus. And then the Holy Spirit, which is that sort of connecting point between the two, right? How we can be in the presence of something without being in the presence of it, right? Like, so that's why getting the Trinity right is very important. Reading Seraphim Rose, I had that epiphany where it's like, this isn't just a theological debate. It's, if you get this wrong, that's how you get Protestantism. That's how you get charismatics. That's how you get evangelicalism. That's how you get some sort of whizzle-wazzle personal Jesus thing that isn't even about Jesus or Christ or anything else like that. It's how you lose the church. You have to get that right in your head. Even if I don't know if that description helped at all. We can do energies and essences really quick, which I think when you start getting your head around that, then it's like all these other things go, oh, okay. There's an instinctual, like, okay, even if I don't
just
get
clicks
it,
into place.
Get it. Like
Yeah.
I'm not in conflict with it anymore. So imagine the energies and essences thing is that, like, the sun. We don't know the sun. We're not on the sun. We don't have a relationship with the sun. We see the sun. We experience the sun through the sun's energies, through its sunlight, through its heat, etc. Right. So even if you're blind, you feel the warmth of the day. Well, when someone tells you that's because of the sun, you get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we experience the sun from its energies, but we don't experience the sun directly. Like, we're not, if you stand on the sun, you're
done.
Sense of purpose, you're done, right? Same thing with God. So we don't experience God's essence. We can't know God's essence in its entirety. It's beyond us. However, we can encounter his energies, which is everything from literal creation to the more metaphysical. So truth, goodness, love, all those things. That is God. And whenever we're encountering that, we're participating in the energies of God. So I think for me, that was always a helpful that distinction helped me understand the Trinity without me ever really understanding the Trinity. Like I may not understand its working mechanisms on a J. Dyer level, or even a Cooper level. Shout out to my highly autistic Orthodox brother, but you can't understand the concept of, like, there are things beyond your understanding, and but yet wants to communicate with you. God's beyond your understanding, but yet he wants to have a relationship with you. So he's sending you things. He's letting you experience him in ways that our little fallen brains can comprehend.
Dude, that sounds so much like a psychedelic trip, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not really. I had some kind of a switch go off in my head where all of a sudden I'm just not really that interested in psychedelics anymore. But I do. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. But yeah, it's like when I was in it, when I was in, the height of some kind of an experience, there is some kind of a presence, something there that you have no ability to understand, but you are being made aware of it somehow. So that it's just like
Ready Girard says that. So that, oftentimes you'll hear people say things like we're religious creatures, right? That religion is caked into us. Girard takes it one step further by saying we are actually transcendent beings. We desire, our number one unifying desire for every single human being on this planet ever is the desire for transcendence. That is almost our unifying desire, and we seek transcendence through all manners of things, religion being one of them, but psychedelics, all these other things to transcend, transhumanism, all these other things are coming up. This is a transcendence of this, right? Whatever this is, to give context and order to that inkling we get of the divine. And you can seek it out in many different ways. The power of religion, and yeah, I've done. Trust me, man, I've done more drugs than you can even possibly imagine. I was an expert on it for a very long time.
You worked in the restaurant industry, so I know that's true.
Yeah.
I've done some restaurant industry work myself.
Yeah, I was in it for a long time, and I was highly self-destructive. So trust me, there's very few drugs out there that I haven't at least tried,
dabbled,
nibbled on a little bit. The thing about all these other things, but the thing about the drug trip is that there's an end, right? There's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end. It's over, and you feel like shit.
Oh, and sometimes you're so fucking happy about that end too, man. Sometimes that end cannot come soon enough.
Yeah, I've had a few mushroom trips like that, but and you can't stay in it perpetually. And I don't think, and if you do, you go insane, right? There've been people who tried, and they've. So with religion, it's that okay, you don't get that intensity all the time. Maybe the saints do, but as someone who's had a series of really profound epiphanies and let's say feelings of God's grace, and having felt it directly in my life, it's not a drug trip, but it's not like ecstasy, but it lasts forever. Like it's always present, even when it's not, right? There's a way. There's the only true passion is the passion of the Christ. Is you're trying to move towards that, but I think people can get caught up in this whole idea of that ecstasy, that burning, that Jesus juice, like that kind of feel, which I think leads people to the charismatic schools and so that, right, where people put themselves in trances and do all this weird stuff, because again, that's transcendence, right? That is a form of transcendence. It's fucking goofy, and probably very damaging to both the mind and the soul, but it is out there. With the Orthodox thing, it's you don't get always a major boost, but you do get, it does make you feel better about everything, generally speaking. Like even when you're feeling horrible, there's this basis now that you can get to and go, okay, say the Jesus prayer, calm down, realize it's not about you, or it is about you in this moment, and just get over it and move on, and trust in the plan,
In this slow motion breakup that I've been going through, I think over the last 2 weeks, I've just kind of come to a place where I just have to accept that it's not. I've been trying to like make it happen, like get it back together. And I've just come to a place where I have to accept that it's over. And I've probably said the Jesus prayer a million times over the last 2 weeks, man. And it does. It gives you a sense of peace. And now that I've come to this point where, like I said, I've had that conversation with Christ, I do feel, I don't like consider myself orthodox yet. I definitely consider myself on that path, but just being where I am, I do feel a peace that, like, I'm sad. I'm very sad about a lot of things. But I just have, just a peace and a faith that, if I do things the right way, that I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be,
Well, here's a kicker to that, is that you are always exactly where you're supposed to be, whether you're doing it right or wrong. You're always exactly
that makes
where
sense.
you're supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to you to make a decision about whether you want to do the right or do the wrong, right? And doing the right isn't about reward. It's not like you're gonna. Even the Jesus prayers, the mercy thing is either reward or not the worst thing possible, which you'll never understand if that was or not. You don't know if that's being answered, but that's where the faith kicks in, and your faith in this element is that you might, and I'm using the role you might face really horrible stuff. You might be fed to lions, for Christ's sake. And this is coming from someone who has an outside. I was just thinking about this the other day. I have this massive phobia about being eaten, to the point where I don't go places where there might be animals that eat me. I don't go in the ocean, for example. I live in a bloody beach town. I will not go in the ocean because there's the possibility of sharks eating me is like, nope, not doing that.
I'm with you on that, dude. I'm with you on that.
Of course, I've joined a religion where the history of it is people being fed to fucking lions. So I'm like, this makes sense, but regardless, whatever you face, if you put your faith in almost, it's that fear of God, right? And you always hear that. You got to fear God more than you fear anyone else. You gotta put your faith in God more than you have faith in everything else, because this is a temporary time we have on this world. That's eternal, and so where you're going is eternal, and you're given this time to get your stuff right, to be accepted into the kingdom. Remove as much sin and prepare yourself for God's love as much as you can. That's what's before you. All the rest of it is just the rest of it. It's either put there by demons or put there to test you, or you know what? Hey man, it's just gravity sometimes. We could. I think we often look for a connective tissue, a reason. Is that God doing it? Is it the devil doing it? Is this doing it? Is that doing it? Almost cast out of your head. Like, sometimes it becomes obvious, and there are instances where you can pinpoint that. But for the most part, don't even think about it. Don't even worry about that. Say the prayer. Do the fasting if you can. All that kind of stuff. Prepare yourself. Get it. What I need to do now is get a priest, because I've done enough work. I've done all the work I can on my own, to a point now where I feel like I'm in a, I'll use the word dangerous, it's not accurate, but I'm at a point where I'm feeling there's a tension, and there's let's say an old demon energy sitting on my soul, and that I now know I have to confront. And to do that, I'm going to need some help. Excuse me. So that's what I'm getting prepared for this year. But but don't, where you're at, don't even worry about that stuff. Say the prayer. Talk to other Orthodox people. Go to a church. talk to a priest, join the liturgy, do the simple stuff. You know, don't get hung about the fasting and all the rest of it. Like you'll get there. There are stages to this. You will. There's a temptation once you get a little bit of it to run, right? This is what we were saying about Jim Bob. It's like I recognize that, right? You get a little bit, and you're like, oh, you know, I'm a superhero, right? Jesus, you know, I'm Captain Jesus. But but that's all vainglory. That's all that crud that you got to confront and get rid of it. And the more humble you get, the more humble you can stay. I have a little motto I say, which is, you know, get humble. Oh, sorry. Is it? Yeah. Get humble. Be useful. Stay grateful. And if you do those three things every day and just kind of remind yourself of that, you're just in a better place. And you know, relationships come and go. It's, you know, you work with the ones that work. You get over the ones that don't. You grow. You know, I know. I'm sorry. This isn't like I'm not very good at advice. I was never that bartender. I was a guy who just listened to people and go, oh, geez, what do you do? Like one other beer. That was always my thing. So I don't have advice to give you other than the basics. Because I think you got it. You got this. You know what you have to do.
I appreciate that. And, you know,
and him, I'm always here. If you
I appreciate that. I just pray. One of the things I pray for frequently is for God to, you know, just illuminate the path for me. You know, to I don't know. That's just the best way that I know. Yeah.
I pray for guidance. I pray for guidance. I pray for lots of things. And how I pray, and I don't know if this is the right way or whatever, but I don't pray for things. I just pray. I pray for what I already have to be, I guess, magnified. Like, you know, I pray to Saint Seraphim of Savov as well, or pray to him for me. You know, to pray for me. And often when I pray for him, I ask for him is to show me joy, to bring me to joy. And you know, it's almost to guide me, to pull me, right? Jesus will pull you often. And a lot of the prayers are just basically about that. You know, I think if you practice humility and you put humility as your number one goal, you'll see things transform with you, because you'll just do it yourself. You know, God's already showed you the path. He's already shown you the real path. You're already starting to walk it. Now the question is just to stay humble, to be less of a judge of his creation and more of a judge of yourself. You know, work on that. It's the Jordan Peterson clean your room thing, but it's true. You know, and you'll find once you start doing that a lot of the other people, you know, and we do a podcast, so like it's one of those balancing things where you don't want to be critical, but at the same time, you know, this guy's saying some crazy stuff. It's just, I think what changes is your position on it and your position towards a person. And when you start seeing that happening, a lot of the old gripes and things you had are just going to fall away. You just won't have them anymore. And it's and you look back on this in a year or two and go, oh yeah, that was a crazy time. You know, and hopefully you and your ex or whatever she is, you know, it can be positive and all that stuff. But
I think in general it will be for both of us. Yeah. Well, I only have one more question for you, Jason. It's, what time is it in Australia right now?
It is 7:30 a.m., sir.
Oh my! It's tomorrow.
Yeah. Wow, I'm 13 hours.
That's crazy.
13 hours ahead of you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go, man, because I don't want to eat up too much more of your time. I appreciate you coming on.
Pee like a racehorse, too.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I would love to have you on again, and I would love to have you and Mark on at some point too.
Well, we'll get you. I think I'll send the invitation where we're going to get ready to do another Friend or Fed. in March, and when we do that, I'll give the invite for you and your. I'm sorry. What's the name of your buddy or your co-host? Chris.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah.
We'll extend that out to you and Chris as well, and get you on there, and we'll build this little network. Because it's kind of what's happening a little bit. Is it's not all Orthodox guys. There's a sort of an orbit happening that I'm noticing. That I'm just glad to be part of. I'm not saying I'm a focal point of anything, but a lot of the times the people we get on Friend or Fed are people kind of in that 200 subscriber range of subscribers, but we get to talk about some really interesting stuff, and it's a fun time. So yeah, you guys are definitely invited.
I appreciate that. You want to throw any plugs out there? I mean, we don't have a huge audience or anything like that, but
come find me.
You got your Twitter up there.
If whatever I haven't said hasn't enticed you enough, anyways, it's there's Twitter. It's also my YouTube. We're on Rumble, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, most podcatchers. We're findable. Come find us and come talk if you want.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much. You have a good night, sir.
You too. Day.